Hey guys, Tyler from Duelcaster here, bringing you a deck tech this week. I have Kumena, Tyrant of Orazca. This is the flashiest new legendary from the new set, Rivals of Ixalan. And I'm going to be breaking it down in this video, and I have the deck list in the video description, so click the little show more button under the video to find the link for that. This deck is really fun to play, super fun to play, and you might enjoy it if you like playing tribal decks or aggro control decks with a lot of synergy. Let's get into it. Alright, so what's the strategy or game plan of this Kumena Merfolk deck? Well, in the early game, you want to contain your opponent's threats through counterspells and, yes, even blocking. In the mid game, you kind of start to pull ahead by drawing cards with Kumena's second ability, the draw card ability. And then in the late game, you tend to overwhelm your opponents in a few massive attacks powered by lords and backed up by counterspells. The average converted mana cost of the deck is only 2.25, so it's really low to the ground and highly interactive. All right, let's go through some of the individual cards here. I grouped it into 5 categories. I have Merfolk, Lords, and Payoffs, and then I have just other Merfolk, cheap other creatures, other spells, and then counter spells. So pretty simple. We have a few Merfolk Lords. Master of the Pearl Trident and Lord of Atlantis are potentially the best of the bunch here. They're really cheap, and they give island walk, and there's a few ways in the deck to make lands into islands, like Spreading Seas. So this can actually come out of nowhere to surprise an opponent who's not even blue. And of course, a lot of blue is a really commonly played color in Duel Commander anyway. All right, and then we have creatures, other Merfolk. These are, some of them have certain utility value, and the other ones are just beaters, like Kumena Speaker's a new one. That's obviously just a beater, but you want to have a lot of cheap Merfolk, especially 1-drops, because ideally you want to be able to tap Kumena to draw a card the turn that it comes down. Like maybe play Kumena, block whatever they're doing or prevent them from attacking, and then draw a card on their end of turn step. Then there's a few other mid-range Merfolk. Some of them have some really good utility, like Harbinger of the Tides. This is a really cheap interactive card that bounces some tapped creature, and you can flash it in for 4 mana. These type of cards are really good. They obviously you'd want to play a card like Venser or something like that in aggro control deck, and these kind of approximate that while also having the Merfolk creature type. So it's perfect. And then we have, once we get to the 4-drops, you have some heavy hitters or synergy cards like Fallow Sage. It's kind of a weak card on its own, but it has so much synergy with Kumena that if it's not answer, you're just going to rip through your deck. And then Master of Waves and even Surge Spanner. This card's been quite good for me as a way to interact with permanents. Often with blue-green, if they get something into play, sneak something into play through your counterspells, you are kind of either forced to ignore it or you can't really deal with it. But with Surge Banner, you can bounce it back to their hand and maybe counter it later. All right, then we have other creatures, and probably over half of these are just 1-drops, 1-drop mana dorks like Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, and so on. These help you cast a turn 2 Kumena, and obviously you wouldn't be able to use its ability right away if you go that route, but it's really nice to get Kumena out as soon as possible, and these help you do it. Then we have Edric. I just wanted to point out this one because it's banned as a commander in Duel Commander, but it's legal in the 99. So any blue-green aggro deck is going to want this card. This can really just avalanche your opponent in card advantage if it's left unchecked. And even you just get one good turn in when they're not expecting it. That can be enough. I have a few effects in here you'll notice where I want to protect my team, my Merfolk. And Kira, even though it's not a Merfolk, does a great job of this. So I thought it was worth it to include alongside Kopala. I just want as many of these effects as possible. Just make it really tough for them to kill your Merfolk. And then we have a few 5-drop creatures that have a ton of power and synergy with Kumena and with other cards in the deck. Prophet of Kruphix and Merkfiend Liege both allow you to untap all your creatures during your opponent's turn, and Prophet even lets you untap your lands and cast creatures with flash, so it's a super powerful card, and makes it easy to not only use Kumena's abilities but also attack while you're doing so, because one of the big drawbacks to this deck or weaknesses is it can be tough sometimes to actually pressure your opponent while utilizing Kumena's abilities, but Prophet of Krufix and Mercfiend Liege allow you to do that. All right, then we have some other non-creature spells here. Aether Vial is a staple in Merfolk across all formats, and it's a little bit trickier in Duel Commander because you can't count on having a turn 1 copy so often, but it comes up every now and then, and when it does, it's just so powerful. And then I have a few cards that, like Kira and Kopala, kind of protect your team or make it disadvantageous for your opponent to kill your creatures. Shaper Sanctuary is a card I really like, and it only costs 1 mana, so it's so easy to just sneak into play when you have a spare mana, even on turn 1. And Steely Resolve gives everything Shroud. So the reason I think this card is very, very good in this deck, and because I have it in here, I don't run a lot of equipment and stuff like that, because that would be somewhat of a non-bow. But you can still use Kumena's abilities through the Shroud that this gives, and even stuff like Hidden String Cipher. All right, we have a few Mana Denial and Spreading Seas, Winter Orb. Earthcraft is a really, really unique old card that gives you some value for tapping your creatures, even if Kumena dies. Earthcraft's hard to get off the board, so this can not only ramp you quite strongly, but to recast Kumena if it dies, but you can get some more value out of cards that I'm going to talk about in a second, Marrow Commerce and Curse of Bounty and stuff. All right, Marrow Commerce. This card was tailor-made for Kumena, even though it was printed over 10 years apart. But because it's a tribal enchantment, Merfolk, you can tap it for Kumena's abilities. So it makes it really easy to go off drawing cards. Then you have Kumena up to block on their turn and draw another card on their turn. So you can easily draw 3 cards in a turn cycle with this. Some other ones that are not quite as good, but still good, Quest for Renewal and Curse of Bounty. And we have some interactive cards like Clonic Rift, Beast Within, for obvious reasons. Just you got to deal with some permanents sometimes. And then Opposition, super powerful card, often prompts a concession once opponent realizes they're just going to get mana screwed out of this card and they kind of can't get out of it. And it's won me a lot of unwinnable games otherwise. Okay, and then we have counter spells. I don't play a super ton of these, but I play a lot of the cheap ones, ones that don't require double blue necessarily, and stuff like even just tempo-based counter spells like Memory Lapse and Remand, because often you can kind of delay them enough where you can finish them, even if they redraw or their spell that you wanted to counter. So they're really good tempo plays. I also have Admiral's Order in here. I wanted to try this other new card out. It's been performing okay. I haven't used raid a whole lot, but just having another hard counter is nice. And the times when you do get to raid it, it's just a complete blowout. All right, and then lands are pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy. I just wanted to point out Mutavault because it turns into a Merfolk, so it really makes it easy to not only draw cards with Kumena, but do so without having to overcommit to the board if you're worried about wrath or something from your opponent. Okay, what are some notable exclusions in this deck? Well, I had Thrasios in here to start out, but I ended up cutting him. He's very good as a partner commander because he provides a lot of just free value in that sense, but he wasn't really pulling his weight in the deck. Just it was too hard to get that 4 mana to draw a card and scry. It just rarely got activated, so it was just a 2 mana 1/3. That's not nearly good enough. Merfolk Sovereign was also in here for a while, but it's kind of the weakest of the lords, and the ability just isn't really necessary with Kumena's own unblock ability, so I ended up cutting that as well. It dies too easily. And then Stony Brook Banneret, kind of like a lord, but it's too small of a body. It's not good for attacking or blocking, and a lot of your Merfolk have really color-intensive abilities, so the colorless reduction isn't as might be irrelevant in a lot of cases. So what are some good matchups for this deck? Well, aggro is a pretty good matchup usually, especially if they rely on attacking through the ground, like Kythian, White Weenie. Kumena is a great blocker himself, so that can buy you a lot of time, if nothing else. Mid-range can be a good matchup. Partner decks such as those involving Tymna, again, rely on kind of slowly accumulating value, but you kind of have a nice angle of attack against these decks. You can block, you can attack, you can counter, so you have a lot of game against stuff like that. Sometimes it's even okay against control if the control deck's heavy on targeted removal and low on sweepers, like even some builds of Kess. Bad matchups include heavy control with lots of removal, including wraths like the Scarab God. Kumena does happen to dodge a lot of the red wrath type effects though, like Anger of the Gods, just because he has 4 toughness. He can survive a lot of those sort of sweeper effects. Leovold is a pretty bad matchup because he makes it really hard to draw extra cards, though you can still use Kumena's ability on their turn. All right, so what are some budget replacements? This deck is pretty affordable. There's a lot of janky commons and stuff, which makes it a little bit easier to build, like overall. But there's a few expensive cards here. True Name Nemesis. This card is kind of a joke. I mean, its power level is off the charts. I just cringe whenever someone plays this against me. And I feel dirty playing it myself. But you know, it's a $30 card at least. So you know, you could, if you don't have it, don't worry, you can play other cards like Wake Thrasher if you want another 3-drop big beater for Merfolk. All right, and then Aether Vial is another, you know, nice card to have, but it's by no means necessary. You could put the Stony Brook Banneret back in here if you want another cost reduction type effect, even though it's a little bit different. Earthcraft is very unique, but the closest approximation that has a bit of synergy with the deck is Harvest Season, and this is kind of a goofy card. It's a bit win more, so I don't run it, but I did consider it when I was first drafting this deck. Treachery is just the power level again, like True Name Nemesis, just off the charts. This card's even banned in Magic Online 1v1 Commander, but you know, the effect is pretty basic. At the end of the day, you could replace it with Control Magic if you wanted to. And finally, Force of Will, staple and legacy, really prominent card. Very nice to have, but you know, if you don't want to plop down $75 for it, you could replace it with a card like Stifle, which has been reprinted now and it's pretty affordable. And I actually considered Stifle even now. I'm still considering Stifle just because it's so nice to use it against the fetch land to kind of mana screw them. Well, I hope you enjoyed this experiment in dissecting fish, as it were. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the video and what changes you'd make to the deck, if any. And don't forget to subscribe to get the latest 1v1 Commander tech every Thursday here from DCM. Thanks for watching, guys.